So our next session here on the Focus stage is all about superpowering startups, how AI is shaping the future of startups. So artificial intelligence has changed so much for companies, from the products that they sell to the services that they provide, but also the potential risks and opportunities available to fast-growing new companies. So here to share some personal insights is a very distinguished panel led by Rachael Kim, CEO at Femtech Salon. She's also an ecosystem builder with an affinity for women and Femtech founders and an emerging investor. So please welcome Rachael and our esteemed panel to the stage.
How is everybody's day?
Yo, yo.
Bringing energy to the stage. Well, we are really excited to have our panelists today. And Tony, you have over 30 years in this space from Nest.
Don't date me. Please, please.
I'm just curious to see from your point of view, given that history, how do you think startups and AI are going to be in for the next 10 years? What's your point of view?
Startups and AI. Well,
Startups
look,
and AI, next 10 years.
There's a lot of hype and there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of money going to from what I think is to the wrong companies. But that said, I think that this is an incredible wave. It reminds me of when the internet came in '95. It reminds me of when smartphone and app store happened. But this is at a whole nother level. And so this is definitely, it's nonstop, but you have to really parse out where it is you fit in the AI space and what pain you're really solving. Too many things where we got these know-it-all GPT systems, what have you. That is not actually solving real problems for real people. And there's ways to make money. As a small entrepreneur, you don't need hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars to do stuff in this space. And we're going to talk about that later.
Nice tee up. Rosanne, Kincaid-Smith, you're the COO of Northern Data Group. I know that you work with both large organizations and startups. Just curious to see, from your perspective, where do you think are the biggest opportunities for startups and AI?
I kind of feel like you can drop the mic and the rest of us can leave. But I think just building on what Tony has said, I think the opportunities are real life scenarios, sort of applications of AI that can actually change the way that we live and work today, and actually making sure that those are brought into the right space and they are commoditized in the right way. These are the big opportunities for startups today.
Are there any good examples that you can
Life
think
sciences, healthcare, education. I mean, my big passion area is healthcare, and we've seen huge acceleration there with the use of AI, and startups have been fundamental to that.
Speaking of startups, you guys do have a cohort, no?
A what?
Cohort, an accelerator cohort?
Ah, yes. One of my favorite topics, of course, the commercialization of our infrastructure is a very great business to be in, and we're enabling a lot of change. But we do that because the passion area for us is actually helping to enforce the ecosystem for AI and helping startups to get access to otherwise the very scarce technology that we provide, which is the NVIDIA-based GPU infrastructure.
Just turning the tables a bit, Roland, Nusselder, you are the CEO of Plumerai. We've been thinking about AI and mass data processing, big infrastructure, big devices, but you have been talking about tiny AI. Can you give the audience a sense of what that means and the application?
Yes, exactly. So all we've been hearing about for the last few years is larger and larger LLMs running on slow, expensive, energy-hogging data centers. But with tiny AI, Plumerai's tiny AI, it does it all locally on the device itself. So in our case, on the cameras. Plumerai's tiny AI is faster, cheaper, runs on battery-powered cameras, security and private, on cheap, off-the-shelf chips. And so starting with the focus on smart home cameras, Plumerai's tiny AI is now running on millions of cameras in the field. And people love their smart home cameras, people detection, familiar face, vehicle, animal, package detection. We're also introducing new features like multi-camera people tracking. These add an important layer of home security. They take away people's stress and just make people's lives more convenient. And so what we're seeing is that there are a lot of companies out there who are providing great products to their customers at great, amazing price points, but they don't have the large internal AI resources that Google Nest, Amazon Ring, Apple has. So we're democratizing AI by making highly accurate AI accessible to those companies, so to those companies outside of big tech, so that they can offer affordable products to their customers.
And you're doing it with a lot less than $100 million.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Tony, I was just about to ask you your point of view on tiny AI.
Yeah, well, tiny AI. Well, so Roland and I, so I'm an investor in Plumerai, but, and I have been for how long now?
I think since 2018.
Yeah,
And
so
been very
2018. So I've been investing in AI a long time. So Tiny AI, I can tell you about Tiny AI because in the original Nest thermostat, we put in AI. We just couldn't call it AI. We couldn't even call it machine learning. We had because too many people would be scared of it. But now, if you don't say it, no one would buy it. So we were doing this in 2011. So we were doing Tiny AI then, and it's been continuing ever since, and it's been delivering a lot of results for many different companies. We're doing drug discovery with Tiny AI that runs on, it's not as tiny as battery-operated processor, but we're doing drug discovery on individual server rack units, and that's it. And we're doing a cancer vaccine that's already been in through human trials and successful with this AI. So when we're talking tiny, I'm talking something a lot smaller than what we're seeing, 70 billion parameters, 100 billion parameters. We're talking literally 30 million parameters on a server or a desktop machine under your desk. So very much a big believer in tiny AI and micro AI and these kinds of things, because those are actually delivering the results and delivering value for the customers and bringing true solutions to those customers. So you don't have to be Microsoft, you don't have to be OpenAI or anyone else to actually compete.
Rosanne, I see you nodding your head. Just curious to see, are any of your clients from a startup and or larger organization thinking about tiny AI?
I don't think tiny AI exactly, but certainly the democratization of access. So we also focus on making sure that people can have access to that so we can create those real-world solutions. So it's quite interesting, the alignment here, because I actually hadn't had an opportunity to speak to you guys before, but making sure that you've got different applications through the most accessible means is a very shared goal. But I think we've got loads of startups, obviously, that access our platform, and that's to create those similar sort of applications, but in a very, very different framework to what you are.
And just to be clear, so I've been talking about tiny AI, but I do think there's still a great opportunity for cloud-based AI. I get actually very excited about LLMs, and especially about these vision LLMs, these multimodal AI models. They open up amazing new use cases for our customers. But for many devices, solely relying on cloud-based AI is a dead end. It consumes far, far too much power, a lot of energy. It gets crazily expensive. So the way to do this, the way to approach it for many devices is by combining large cloud-based AI models, running them in tandem with tiny on-device AI. But that's really difficult to build, but that's what we've been doing the last few years.
Amazing. Tony, question to you. So, big tech and AI, thoughts?
Big tech and AI.
Big tech. About controlling AI.
Oh, controlling it.
Yeah.
Again, these small models can work. Big people are seeing it because they're seeing the money and saying the only way to do this was incredibly huge infrastructure and a lot of money. And at the end of the day, none of this stuff in the big realm is making money. So we're seeing this. This has just been a 2-year phenomenon. Give it another 2 years to have this play out, and you're going to see people going, oh, wait a second, we got to start making money. Let me give you a counterexample. The counterexample is self-driving cars. Everybody went crazy in 2014, 2015, self-driving cars, they're going to come, they're coming. Hundreds of millions of dollars invested, billions of dollars invested. We are now down to maybe 2 companies in the world doing self-driving cars, and there's a lot of AI in that, lots of sensors, lots of hardware, and they still cannot do it economically, okay? It is starting to work in relatively highly dense cities where they do a lot of behind-the-scenes machinations to actually make it work. So that, we're already gone past 10 years, and it is still not even economically possible. We're in year 2 of this LLM wave. You're going to see this play out over the next 10 years. You're going to see a lot of people drop out and a lot of people going, wait a second, it doesn't quite work yet. And so that's what you're going to see in a lot of things. You're going to scale back, and when you scale back, these large models, you're going to start to see them starting to work again, and they're going to be economical for people to run. So is big tech going to roll it? Maybe right now, but it's not going to be long term. The other thing to understand is that big tech, where you apply this AI properly, like what Apple's hopefully going to do when they show their new stuff, but what Google's doing, they're showing it where they already own the customer, and it's a feature inside of where they already own the customer. It's very hard to see where people are going to come up and create a whole new customer subset and be able to compete with big tech because they already own the customer. So as long as those big companies are innovating, but innovating in a very feature discrete manner, they will be successful. If they're not innovating, then there's something that can rise up. But I really don't think the nature of this game is going to change much than what it is today.
Rosanne, curious to see, from a start perspective, what are some key considerations you think that founders should be taking into consideration to future-proof what Tony has laid out?
Well, actually, I just thought it was quite an interesting position to take. I mean, just more generally in terms of big tech and the place that big tech play, and then players like us, and even what you are doing. I mean, there's surely a very big opportunity to push past that. I mean, interesting, we were talking before, and Rachael was saying to me, well, I didn't even know who you were, right? And actually, I like to think we're kind of a big deal, but like this is obviously subjective opinion. But I mean, it was a frictionless decision, that's what you call it. For everybody, it's a frictionless decision to go to the name brand that you know. That doesn't mean you get what you want. You get a version of what you want, and then maybe later on you find it's actually not delivering the outcomes that you need. And so providers like us or innovators like you have definitely got a niche, and there is an angle in that market to innovate above what the hyperscalers and the large brands are doing. And to your point, I mean, a lot of what they do, yes, some of it's innovative, but some of it is really pretty BAU, and it's not really associated with true societal change or any real progress. It's just product feature. I mean, again, we can argue about this, but I think it's ultimately the space. I think there is a big gap in the market for what can be done through the democratization of access to allow for better innovation and better access through the alternative providers to the hyperscalers.
I fully agree with that in new domains, not in existing domains. So if you look at certain like ed tech, I believe in that because I don't think anybody's hitting ed tech. Look, when you look at AI, there's 3 uses. There's one, educating humans, superpowering humans, and replacing humans. Those are the 3 areas of AI. Where you're going to see is education and super tools. And so the people who have the super tools today, Adobe, Microsoft 365, those things, when they add the AI as features, then you're actually able to for people to use them. Replacing people, agentic AI, that's a whole nother thing. So I'm talking about the first 2. Those are where the money is. That's where you can really make a difference. This agentic stuff, it's research. It's absolute research. And maybe one day that will happen. But the promises and the expectations, they're overblown right now. Go for those first 2. Yeah.
I mean, I think somebody was saying to me earlier on today that the take-up of Copilot on Microsoft was 0.1% of the customer base. I mean, that is not a huge take-up. So in terms of innovation on a very established platform, that seems very marginal to me and a huge opportunity for somebody else to do something new.
Except it's embedded in the tool sets. So if they already have 365, so to go around it, it's very, very difficult.
APIs.
Sure, but then someone still has to build on top of it and make it economically attractive.
Smaller down.
Yes.
And here we are.
And here we are. Roland, any thoughts on Rosanne and Tony's
It's a very
perspective?
difficult discussion.
Yeah, because it's so varied. Like, we have to really talk about each domain and get into real specific applications. And then we can have a real argument. All this stuff, AI hype, is really, really generic. It's like back in '99. You know, there's not going to be any more bricks and mortar stores. There's not going to be any more retail. It's all e-tail. No one's going to do anything. And then we saw what happened. That's absolutely not the case. So we have to get into specific subdomains and talk about each one and what's the right thing to do. They're doing the right thing for security cameras and home security and small office, home office. But when you talk about, you know, what's the right thing to do for word processing and generation, or email, that's another thing. If you're talking about agents, it's a whole nother thing. So it's just the topics are just way too general because it's too new of an industry, and that's okay. That's what happened in the internet days. But We'll get better language. We're going to get more, modularization of the industry, and we'll have much more productive discussions. But right now, it's all just bullshit. And hypothesizing and science fiction and woo.
I love that. That's going to be the quote from the session. It's all bullshit. So one last question for every panelist, and then there might be some time for one or two from the audience, so start thinking. Roland, what's the one piece of advice that you give next-gen founders in AI to think about?
So within AI, maybe it's a little bit more technical, but try to build a prototype of the full solution as fast as possible, and then show that the customers get feedback, and then start iterating like crazy on each of the different components. So that's the data set, the prompt that you're using, the model that you're using, whether it's an API, whether it's one of those API models or open source model or your own model. On the pre-processing, all these components, look at which component is the biggest bottleneck, which bottleneck is going to give you the biggest gains the fastest. Start iterating really fast, and then you can build something that actually works very well. Also on the UI, and that's what we've been doing, iterating very fast on each of those components, and that in the end resulted in the most accurate AI for smart home cameras.
Rosanne?
Just really building on what you're saying, I think the best thing to do is to focus on the intersection between tech and commercialization. Try to find a way to take your product to market, so servicing the customer need, and that might be inherent in what you're saying, but without us actually testing these applications in market, we're kind of in a dead space. So find the path between tech and commerce.
Last but not least,
I have nothing to say. No. So to be clear, for me, it's taking the technology and apply it to a vertical industry. That's where it's really successful, like in security cameras or what have you. Where you're going these general things, trying to be very general, that's not going to work. Start where the problems are and apply the new technology in agriculture or in materials or in construction, and go there and solve those needs, because that's not where the big tech is playing anyways. Go to where those problems are, where AI can actually, whether that's a tiny model, a large language model, or anything in between, to be able to solve their problems. But look at the verticals first. Stop looking at the technology first and trying to apply it.
I agree.
All right, I'm going to open up to my audience. Please say your name and the question.
Hi, thank you, panelists and everyone in the room. My name's Fari. I've got a reproductive healthcare insurtech, really early. And one of the conundrums for me that a lot of angels and others in the ecosystem say to me is, actually, what about the sensitivity of health data? Particularly, reproductive healthcare is really the sort of thing that you wouldn't want to get a leak or anything like that. But also, how do we apply AI ethically in a space that is so underserved, and really people may feel that you can do a lot once you get your hands on that data?
Why don't you start? You're in security.
So for example, elderly care is an interesting use case, where people live on their own. Older people live on their own, but you want to make sure that if they fall, they're detected, or if they're sitting the whole day on their chair and they might have had a heart attack in their chair, you want to know that. But these camera devices, and basically you can only get real information from camera devices, these camera devices are then placed in highly private environments. And there people, obviously the end user, it's not great if that's streamed to the cloud and where other people are watching it. You have to process it locally as much as possible so that it's private, but still fast and still reliable. So I think Tiny AI is actually a great use case for that.
So I have a company called Nabla. It's out of Paris. We serve over 400,000 physicians around the world, but mostly in the US, for being a doctor's assistant. So doctor records all the notes, doctor records all of the interaction with the patient, and then it automatically generates all of the HIPAA compliant reports, and also with all this security. It can be done. We're doing in both a local and a centralized model, but you have to go through all the security protocols and everything and all the tests. But we've already successfully deployed AI, like I said, to hundreds of thousands of doctors, and are using it even more so than ever. We see that it's just taking off. So do it right, and it'll work.
Thank you. Alan Greenberg, ex-Apple, ASI.tech. It's really interesting in terms of your perspectives, and I completely agree, but there's two parts to my question. One is, you haven't yet discussed the authenticity of content, and I think that's a critical part of this equation. And I would advocate that there's a discipline that needs to be taught, or two disciplines. One is critical thinking, in other words, the ability to ask the right question, and critical thought, the ability to interpret the answer coming back to you. I'd be keen to have your comments on that.
Yes. All I can say is you are absolutely right. We do not have the data sets, and I don't know how the two others think about this, but the data sets are corrupted. I think of it this way. How many of you have kids? Anyone here? Okay. When we raise kids, you go and you worry about what they read and what school they go to and who they talk to and what their environment is, and you know more or less where the input is that they're learning from, right? If you were to take a kid and say, here's the world of internet data, learn from it now, and then we're going to subtract out the things we don't like, and we think we get it all, now we have a super kid who's learned everything but has all kinds of craziness inside of them that we don't know about. We are training these systems the absolute wrong way, and Roland can probably speak to how he's doing the training. Here, I'll give you there you go.
Yeah, so also,
Very important.
so the data set's very important as soon as you start talking about on-device or AI or any efficient AI. Like if you take like the new model that was announced or released by Meta just last week, that's a Llama 3.2 multimodal model. It's a great vision model, but it knows much more than what we care about. Like we care about the smart home camera situation, but it's been trained on like slides like this, on diagrams that you find on the internet, on logos. It probably remembers the CogX logo. You don't care about that. It needs to be much more specialized. The data set needs to be much more specialized. That's how you build more reliable models and models that are a lot more accurate and a lot faster.
And don't hallucinate. Exactly.
Rosanne.
I mean, I'm going to have to fight to get a word in edgeways, but I think they've covered it well. I shouldn't have sat in the middle.
You can elbow both of us.
But this is why I'm creating
we
space.
spoke for about half an hour this morning, so I won't take any time away from you.
Okay, but even if you spoke with Alan, we do have the wider audience. Any other one or 2 points on perspective, given the fact of our clients thinking about critical thinking, are the startups approaching it from that perspective, from your work at Northern Data?
I mean, we are an infrastructure provider, right? So security is paramount to everything that we are doing. And we obviously encourage our customers to think through how they want to apply the AI that they are training on our infrastructure. But ultimately, it's down to the software providers, the experience, and all of the data sets that are being applied to that to really apply their critical thinking. But I would encourage everybody in the audience to critically think about everything that they do, because garbage in, garbage out, and that is going to determine the future of AI and everything that it is applied to in the future. So curate, moderate, make sure it's the highest quality data, and make sure that you own that data, because data is king.
Absolutely. And one interesting thing that just happened last week in California is now there's a transparency law. And so I think that more and more people, when they start using these agents or LLMs or whatever it's going to be, in California now, you have to be transparent about the data sources you use to train these models. And so you're going to see more and more of this, just like you have a resume, like you went to this school and you went here and you had this. We're going to get a dossier of each of these AI systems, and you're going to need to know what's inside it to understand, because you might be taking on the legal risk by using them and replacing humans with it. So you're going to have to really understand the data sets, and you should push your governments to make sure there's regulations to open and be transparent on the data these systems are trained on.
I'm going to wrap up with one more question. Anyone else from the audience? In the back.
Thank you. Hi, Tim Flagg, UK AI, the trade association for UK AI. I wondered if I could ask the panel, what's the one thing you'd like to see the government do to support AI startups?
I mean, I'll just start with the obvious. Provide some investment.
I think for me, it's really about one, staying out of the way, but actually holding the big tech accountable and don't let them run, especially with the data, as you brought up, which is know where this data is. Because right now, the reason why OpenAI is saying, oh, we really love regulation is because they already scraped the entire internet of all the data before the data providers actually knew that they were scraping it. And so they're like, this is great. Shut down all of my competition. I already have a treasure trove of data that you can't get. So to them, it's a moat. So we have to go back and go to these other systems and say, if you scraped, we need to know what you've scraped and understand what it is. And the governments need to do that to allow innovation to happen at all levels, not just big tech, but all the way down.
Roland, as a founder, thoughts?
So what's, for example, annoying is that in the EU right now, the Meta Llama 3.2 model, multimodal model, is not available. In the UK it is, which is good for us. But if you have a team in the EU, that's bad. So I think also be very careful with the regulation, especially with too much regulation, too vague, too early.
Last question. Where can everybody find you today if they want to speak with you around AI and startups? Tony?
I'll be around. I have another talk later this evening.
At the main stage, correct?
On the main stage later this evening.
Roseanne?
LinkedIn or the Henry Cole Room.
And Roland?
Yeah, here, LinkedIn, go to our website. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.